Marcus Reynolds checked his watch as he walked through the busy terminal of O'Hare International Airport. He was right on time. His flight to San Francisco would board in 90 minutes. Plenty of time to review some documents in the quiet of Atlantic Airways' executive lounge. At 43, Marcus had built Horizon Capital from a small investment firm into one of the most respected venture capital companies on the East Coast. His keen eye for promising startups and ethical approach to business had earned him both wealth and respect in financial circles. Today's meeting with a promising tech company could mean millions in smart investments. Marcus approached the lounge entrance, travel-worn but impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. Before he could present his credentials, the receptionist looked up with a frown. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting he might be lost. "Yes, I'd like to access the lounge. I'm a platinum member," Marcus replied, sliding his first-class ticket and membership card across the counter. The receptionist examined his credentials with unusual scrutiny. "Do you have additional identification?" Marcus noticed a white businessman walk in behind him, flash a card, and receive an immediate smile and welcome. Strange, he'd used this lounge dozens of times without issue. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked calmly, though his stomach tightened. "We need to verify your membership." "New policy," she said, avoiding eye contact. Marcus provided his driver's license. The receptionist made a phone call, speaking in hushed tones. By now, 3 more travelers had entered without additional checks. A manager appeared, a thin man with a permanent frown. "Sir, could you step aside? There seems to be some confusion with your credentials." "What confusion exactly?" Marcus asked. "I've been a platinum member for 8 years. We've had issues with fraudulent memberships," the manager explained, loud enough for nearby travelers to hear. "We need to confirm yours is legitimate." The implication hung in the air. People stared. Marcus felt his face grow warm, not from embarrassment but from the familiar sting of discrimination barely disguised as procedure. "You're suggesting my membership might be fraudulent." Marcus kept his voice steady. "Interesting that you haven't checked anyone else's credentials this thoroughly." The manager's face hardened. "Sir, if you're going to be difficult, perhaps you should weigh elsewhere." An older woman behind Marcus spoke up. "I've been watching this whole thing. You didn't ask for extra ID from anyone else, including me. This is appalling." The manager flushed red. "Ma'am, this isn't your concern." "Oh, but I think it is," she countered. "I've been flying Atlantic for 30 years, and I'm embarrassed by what I'm seeing." More people were watching now. The manager, realizing the situation was spiraling, finally checked Marcus's credentials on the computer. "It appears everything is in order," he muttered, handing back Marcus's ID and cards. "You may enter." Marcus took a deep breath. He could make a scene, he had every right to, but that wasn't his style. "Thank you for finally doing your job," he said quietly. Inside the lounge, Marcus found a quiet corner. His hands trembled slightly as he texted his assistant to document what had happened. This wasn't the first time he'd faced such treatment, but something felt different today. Maybe it was the public humiliation, or maybe it was simply that after decades of success, he was tired of proving he belonged in spaces he had earned the right to enter. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this incident would set in motion events that would shake Atlantic Airways to its core. Marcus settled into his first-class seat on the flight to San Francisco, outwardly calm, but inwardly still processing the lounge incident. He declined the flight attendant's offer of champagne, opting instead for water. His mind needed clarity, not clouds. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Marcus opened his laptop but couldn't focus on the presentation he needed to review. The faces of the lounge staff kept appearing in his mind, their suspicion, their assumption that he didn't belong. He worked too hard and achieved too much to be treated like an intruder. "You okay there?" asked an elderly gentleman in the seat beside him. "You've been staring at that blank screen for 10 minutes. Marcus smiled politely. "Just one of those days." "I hear that. I'm Harold, by the way. Marcus Reynolds." Harold's eyebrows shot up. "Of Horizon Capital? Well, I'll be. I read about your clean energy fund in Financial Weekly. Brilliant move." This was the Marcus that the lounge staff hadn't bothered to see, a man whose investment decisions were featured in major publications, whose business acumen was respected across industries. Thank you, Marcus replied, somewhat surprised by the recognition. My daughter works in renewable energy, Harold continued. Your fund gave her startup its first big break, changed her life. As they talked, Marcus felt the tightness in his chest begin to ease. This was the kind of interaction he was used to in business circles, respect based on his work, not assumptions based on his appearance. When Harold dozed off, Marcus returned to his thoughts. He pulled out his phone and carefully documented the lounge incident in an email to himself, including every detail while it was fresh in his memory. Names, times, exact words used. He'd learned long ago that precision mattered when dealing with discrimination. Marcus had encountered bias throughout his career, from being mistaken for janitorial staff at his first finance job despite wearing a bespoke suit, to having security called when he viewed a potential office space for his firm. Usually, he handled these situations privately, not wanting to be labeled as difficult or playing the race card. But something had shifted. Perhaps it was the accumulated weight of these experiences, or perhaps it was the public humiliation in front of other business travelers. Whatever the reason, Marcus decided this time would be different. When his plane landed in San Francisco, Marcus had 5 missed calls from his assistant, Jordan. I documented everything like you asked, Jordan said when Marcus called back. But there's something else you should know. Social media is buzzing about what happened. That woman who spoke up for you in the lounge? She's Barbara Chen, the tech columnist. She posted about the incident without naming you, but it's gaining traction. Marcus felt conflicted. He'd never sought publicity for these experiences, preferring to handle them through proper channels. There's more, Jordan continued. I was researching Atlantic Airways for potential investment opportunities last week, remember? They're in final talks for a major merger with Suncoast Airlines. The announcement is expected next month. Marcus stopped walking in the middle of the terminal. A merger. That explained why Atlantic's staff would be particularly sensitive about their company image right now. It also meant Atlantic's executives would be extremely concerned about anything that might jeopardize the deal. Send me everything we have on Atlantic and Suncoast, Marcus said, and see if you can find out which investment banks are handling the merger. As he stepped into the taxi, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't just file a complaint that would be buried in customer service. He would use the tools he knew best: business leverage and financial influence. The taxi driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Bad day? Marcus smiled slightly. No, but Atlantic Airways might soon have one. Marcus's meeting with the tech startup in San Francisco went well, but his mind kept returning to the incident at O'Hare. During a coffee break, he checked his phone and found that Barbara Chen's social media post had gained significant attention. While she hadn't named him, many business travelers who witnessed the scene had added their own accounts in the comments. By evening, Atlantic Airways had issued a statement. We are aware of reports regarding an incident at our O'Hare Executive Lounge. Atlantic Airways is committed to treating all passengers with respect. We are investigating this matter and will address any service failures. The bland corporate response made Marcus shake his head. No acknowledgement of what actually happened. No recognition of the discrimination at play. His phone rang. It was Diane Lee, his second in command at Horizon Capital. Have you seen Atlantic's statement? She asked without preamble. Just read it. Standard damage control. Well, they're about to control more damage. Someone connected the dots and figured out you were the passenger involved. Your name is trending. Marcus looked out his hotel window at the San Francisco skyline. He hadn't wanted this kind of attention, but perhaps it was necessary. There's more, Diane continued. Jordan forwarded me the research on Atlantic's merger with Suncoast. It's bigger than we thought. $3.8 billion. And guess who's handling the financing? Who? Westmore Partners and Freeman Group. Marcus sat up straighter. Horizon Capital had significant investments with both financial institutions. More importantly, he personally sat on an advisory board at Westmore. Their PR team just sent you an email, Diane added, offering sincere apologies and 50,000 complimentary miles. Miles? Marcus couldn't help but laugh. They think they can buy me off with miles? The email is from their customer relations department. Not even a vice president, let alone the CEO. Catherine Parker is nowhere to be seen. Catherine Parker was Atlantic's CEO, known for her aggressive expansion strategies and tight control over operations. Her absence from the response spoke volumes. As Marcus ended the call with Diane, his hotel phone rang. The front desk informed him that a package had arrived. Minutes later, a hotel staff member delivered an elaborate gift basket with a note. "Mr. Reynolds, please accept our sincere apologies for today's unfortunate misunderstanding. Atlantic Airways values your business. Customer Relations Team." Marcus set the basket aside and opened his laptop. A quick search showed that Atlantic Airways had faced discrimination complaints before. 3 years ago, a flight attendant had sued after being repeatedly passed over for promotion while less qualified white colleagues advanced. The case was settled quietly. Last year, a Middle Eastern family had been removed from a flight after another passenger reported feeling uncomfortable with their presence. The airline had issued an apology but defended their staff's actions as following protocol. These weren't isolated incidents. They reflected company culture. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Atlantic's stock price dipped 3% after close. Analysts linking it to social media backlash. Just then, Marcus received an email from Jeffrey Winters, Atlantic's Vice President of Corporate Affairs. "Mr. Reynolds, I hope this message finds you well. We deeply regret your experience at our O'Hare Lounge. This incident does not reflect Atlantic's values. Our CEO, Catherine Parker, has requested that I personally address this matter. We would appreciate the opportunity to make this right and welcome any suggestions you might have. The staff members involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Too little, too late, Marcus thought. Catherine Parker still hadn't reached out personally, instead delegating the task. The staff were convenient scapegoats for a deeper problem. Marcus forwarded the message to his legal team with a simple note. "Document everything. We're just getting started." He then opened a new document and began typing. "Questions for Westmore Partners regarding due diligence on the Atlantic Suncoast merger." Marcus returned to New York 3 days after the incident, his mind still troubled but now focused. He had decided against filing a formal complaint with Atlantic Airways. Their superficial response had made it clear they didn't understand, or didn't want to acknowledge, the real issue. As he settled back into his office at Horizon Capital, a stack of reports awaited his review. His assistant Jordan had compiled information on potential investment opportunities across various sectors. Marcus flipped through them, pausing when he reached the transportation file. "Atlantic Airways?" he murmured, seeing the familiar logo. Jordan appeared at his door. "Yes, they're on our watch list for potential investments. Thought you should see their latest financials given what happened." Marcus nodded and began reading. 5 pages in, he stopped suddenly. "Jordan, come look at this." Jordan peered over his shoulder at the document. "Atlantic Airways is in final negotiations for a $3.8 billion merger with Suncoast Airlines," Marcus said, tapping the page. "The deal would create the third largest airline in the country and open up valuable routes across the Pacific." "That explains their PR team's panic," Jordan replied. "Bad press is the last thing they need right now." Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. Who's backing this merger? Jordan checked another file. Multiple institutional investors. Westmore Partners is leading the financing. And he paused. 3 pension funds we manage portfolios for are being courted to support the deal. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "And I sit on Westmore's advisory board." He turned to his computer and began searching for more information about Atlantic Airways. Past news stories revealed a troubling pattern. A discrimination lawsuit from a former employee settled quietly 2 years ago. A Muslim family removed from a flight after a passenger complained. A disabled passenger forced to wait 2 hours for assistance. These weren't isolated incidents. They suggested a company culture that tolerated discrimination and poor treatment of certain passengers. "Jordan, get me everything we have on Atlantic's corporate structure. Board members, executive team, human resources policies. And find out who's handling diversity and inclusion there." "On it," Jordan replied, already typing notes. "What are you thinking?" Marcus stared at the merger announcement on his screen. "I'm thinking that companies don't change unless they have to. Atlantic sent me a gift basket and put a couple of employees on leave. They think that solves the problem." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. But the real problem is deeper. It's in their corporate DNA. For the next 2 hours, Marcus and Jordan dug through reports, financial filings, and news articles. The picture that emerged wasn't flattering. Atlantic Airways had one of the lowest diversity scores among major airlines. Their executive team was entirely white and predominantly male. Their board included 12 members, 11 white men and 1 white woman. Most troubling was their pattern of handling problems. Quick apologies, symbolic gestures, but no substantial changes. "Look at this," Jordan said, pointing to his screen. "Their chief of customer experience resigned 6 months ago. The position is still vacant." Marcus nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. They don't prioritize the passenger experience. They're focused on growth and acquisitions. He pulled up his calendar and began scheduling meetings. "I'm going to talk to the investment committees at those pension funds, and I need to attend Westmore's next board meeting." Jordan looked concerned. "Are you going to tell them what happened to you?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't need to. I'm going to show them the data on Atlantic's pattern of behavior and let them decide if this is a company worth investing in right now." He turned back to his computer, his expression determined. Atlantic Airways thinks this incident was about one black passenger being mistreated. They don't realize it's about a flawed system that allows discrimination to happen repeatedly. Marcus began drafting notes for his presentations. He wouldn't need to mention his personal experience. The numbers told the story clearly enough. Atlantic Airways had a serious corporate culture problem that posed a risk to investors. And now, with billions of dollars hanging in the balance, people would finally pay attention. Marcus sat alone in his New York office, gazing at the spread of documents on his desk. 3 days had passed since the incident at O'Hare, and he had made a decision. This would not be about personal revenge. It would be about lasting change. The financial data before him told a clear story. Atlantic Airways' merger with Suncoast wasn't just another business deal. It was Catherine Parker's crown jewel, the achievement that would define her career. The $3.8 billion merger would create the third-largest airline in the country and unlock valuable international routes. But this impressive deal rested on a shaky foundation. It needed approvals from major institutional investors, at least 2 of which had Marcus on their boards. Additionally, Horizon Capital managed portfolios for 3 pension funds whose backing was crucial for the merger. Marcus picked up his phone. "Jordan, schedule meetings with the investment committee at State Teachers Pension Fund and the board at Municipal Workers Fund. Make it for tomorrow if possible. They'll want to know what this is about," Jordan replied. "Tell them it's about risk assessment for the transportation sector." After hanging up, Marcus turned to his computer and opened a presentation he'd been working on all night. The title slide read, "Corporate Culture as Financial Risk, the Atlantic Airways Case Study." The presentation contained no mention of his personal experience. Instead, it presented cold, hard data, Atlantic's history of discrimination complaints compared to industry averages, their settlement costs, their diversity metrics at executive levels, dismally below industry standards, and their customer satisfaction scores among minority travelers. The final slides showed projections, potential revenue impact of brand damage, regulatory risk factors, and comparison cases of companies whose value dropped after similar issues came to light. Marcus's strategy was simple but powerful. He wouldn't need to mention his experience or make accusations. The data spoke for itself. Any responsible investor would question whether Atlantic Airways, with its pattern of problems, was truly ready for a merger of this magnitude. The next morning, Marcus entered the boardroom at State Teachers Pension Fund in a crisp navy suit, projecting quiet confidence. "Thank you all for making time," he began, addressing the 7 board members. "I'm here to discuss a potential risk factor in your transportation sector investments." For 30 minutes, Marcus presented his data. He spoke in careful, measured tones, never raising his voice or showing emotion. He didn't need to. The board members' expressions shifted from curiosity to concern as the presentation progressed. "These patterns suggest a deeply embedded cultural issue at Atlantic Airways," Marcus concluded. "As fiduciaries responsible for teachers' retirement funds, I believe we must consider whether the company has adequately addressed these issues before approving further investment, particularly regarding the pending merger." The room fell silent. Then Helen Garcia, the chairwoman, spoke up. Marcus, this is concerning data. Why hasn't this been raised before? Most of these incidents were settled quietly or addressed with minimal public relations damage control, Marcus replied. But the pattern is clear when you look at the aggregate data. Another board member leaned forward. You're not suggesting we block the merger. I'm suggesting we do our due diligence, Marcus answered carefully. Perhaps the merger should be conditional on Atlantic implementing substantial reforms with measurable outcomes. The meeting at Municipal Workers Fund that afternoon went similarly. By evening, both funds had decided to request additional information from Atlantic Airways before approving the merger. Neither mentioned Marcus's personal incident. They didn't need to. The data alone was enough to raise serious concerns. Back in his office that night, Marcus received a text from Diane. Atlantic's stock dropped 5% today. Rumors circulating about merger complications. Marcus put down his phone and looked out at the city lights. He hadn't gone public with his story. He hadn't filed a lawsuit. He had simply presented the facts in the language that Wall Street understood best, risk and return, and it was already working. His office phone rang. The caller ID showed Atlantic Airways headquarters. Catherine Parker was finally ready to talk. Word spread quickly through financial circles. What had started as a single incident at O'Hare was now causing major investors to question the Atlantic Suncoast merger. Marcus's carefully prepared presentations had hit their mark without him ever needing to mention his personal experience. By Thursday morning, Atlantic Airways stock had fallen 8% from Monday's opening price. Business news channels began running segments asking what was happening with the previously celebrated merger. One financial analyst on Morning Market said, "Sources tell us major pension funds are requesting additional corporate governance information from Atlantic before approving the deal. This is unusual at such a late stage." In the elegant corner office of Atlantic Airways' Chicago headquarters, CEO Catherine Parker paced before floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. "What do you mean they're hesitating?" She snapped at her chief financial officer. "Westmore Partners assured us the investors were on board. The paperwork was practically signed." "That was last week," the CFO replied, his voice tense. "Now they're saying they need more information about our corporate culture and diversity practices. 2 pension funds are requesting detailed staff training records and information on past discrimination complaints." Catherine stopped pacing. Why would they suddenly care about that now? Her assistant appeared at the door, looking nervous. "Miss Parker, Mr. Winters from Corporate Affairs needs to see you immediately. He says it's urgent." Moments later, Jeffrey Winters laid out the situation. "We traced the source of the concerns. Marcus Reynolds." "Who?" Parker asked, frowning. "The passenger from the O'Hare Lounge incident on Monday, the one we sent the gift basket to." Winters handed her a tablet. "He's not just any passenger. He's the founding partner of Horizon Capital. They manage over $12 billion in assets, including significant positions in 3 pension funds that are key to our merger approval." Catherine's face paled as she scrolled through Marcus's impressive credentials. Harvard Business School, Forbes 40 Under 40 list, board positions at multiple financial institutions, including Westmore Partners. "Why wasn't I informed of his stature immediately after the incident?" she demanded. Winters looked uncomfortable. The lounge staff didn't recognize him. By the time we connected the dots, our standard customer relations team had already sent the form apology and miles offer. "A form apology?" Catherine's voice rose in disbelief. "To someone with this much financial influence, during the most important merger in our company's history." She grabbed her phone and dialed Marcus's office herself, only to be told by his assistant that Mr. Reynolds was in meetings all day. The assistant's tone made it clear that Catherine Parker wasn't a priority. Across town, Marcus was indeed in meetings with the editorial board of the Financial Times. He had been invited to discuss venture capital trends, but the conversation inevitably turned to corporate governance. "Mr. Reynolds, there are rumors that Atlantic Airways merger is facing unexpected scrutiny from investors," one editor said. "Given your position in the financial world, what's your perspective on corporate culture as a merger consideration?" Marcus responded carefully. "I believe that how a company treats people, all people, is a direct reflection of its values and ultimately affects its bottom line. Smart investors look beyond the numbers to examine patterns of behavior that might indicate future risks. He never mentioned his personal experience, but he didn't need to. His message was clear and landed on the front page of the Financial Times business section the next morning. Culture matters. Why smart investors examine behavior patterns before mergers. By Friday afternoon, Atlantic's PR team was in crisis mode. They issued a statement highlighting their commitment to diversity, but it rang hollow against the emerging story. Anonymous employees began speaking to business reporters about Atlantic's problematic internal culture, describing an environment where complaints were buried and whistleblowers sidelined. Finally, Catherine Parker's assistant handed her a note. "Marcus Reynolds has agreed to take your call at 4 p.m. Catherine straightened her jacket and practiced what she would say. She needed this merger to happen. She was prepared to offer anything to make this problem go away: compensation, a public apology, even a position on their corporate board. What she didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't interested in any of those things. The call between Marcus Reynolds and Catherine Parker lasted exactly 27 minutes. Marcus sat in his office, phone on speaker, with his legal counsel present but silent. Catherine's voice came through crisp and professional, but with an undercurrent of tension. "Mr. Reynolds, thank you for taking my call. I want to personally apologize for your experience at our O'Hare lounge. It was unacceptable and does not reflect Atlantic's values." Marcus listened without interrupting. Catherine continued with practiced sincerity, offering everything from lifetime premium status to a personal meeting to discuss compensation. When she finally paused, Marcus spoke quietly. "Ms. Parker, I appreciate you reaching out, though I note it's taken 5 days since the incident. I'm not interested in special treatment or financial compensation." "Then what can we do to make this right?" Catherine asked, the desperation in her voice barely concealed. "This isn't about making things right for me," Marcus replied. "This is about changing the system that made my experience possible in the first place." Marcus laid out his terms clearly. He wanted Atlantic Airways to implement real, measurable changes: diversity at executive and board levels, comprehensive anti-bias training for all staff, transparent reporting of discrimination incidents, and accountability structures with teeth. "These aren't just feel-good measures," Marcus explained. "They're sound business practices that will strengthen your company and reduce future risk." Catherine tried to negotiate. "We can certainly form a committee to explore these suggestions." "Not suggestions, Ms. Parker. Requirements," Marcus interrupted. "And not a committee. Action. The investors I've spoken with share these concerns. The merger timetable will remain frozen until we see concrete steps." After the call ended, Catherine summoned her executive team for an emergency meeting. The message was clear: without addressing these fundamental issues, the $3.8 billion merger would collapse. The next morning, Atlantic Airways released a statement announcing a comprehensive corporate restructuring to strengthen our commitment to inclusive excellence. The carefully worded press release made no mention of the O'Hare incident or Marcus Reynolds. But behind the scenes, real change began taking shape. Within 1 week, Atlantic's board approved the creation of a chief diversity officer position with actual authority and budget. They contracted with a respected civil rights organization to review all policies and practices. Most significantly, they agreed to a third-party audit of their handling of past discrimination complaints. Marcus worked methodically through investment channels, never grandstanding or seeking public credit. When Westmore Partners called a special meeting to review the merger, he presented a detailed framework for what meaningful change at Atlantic Airways should look like. "These aren't just ethical requirements," he told the roomful of financiers. "They're risk management strategies. A company that repeatedly generates discrimination complaints is a company with liability issues waiting to happen." The investment bankers, speaking the language of risk and return, found this argument compelling. They made their support of the merger conditional on Atlantic implementing Marcus's framework, with specific benchmarks and timetables. Catherine Parker initially fought against what she saw as outside interference in her company. But as major investors made their positions clear, she recognized her options were limited. The merger was her legacy, and she couldn't let it fall apart. In a private meeting with her board, she finally admitted, "We have a problem, and fixing it isn't just the right thing to do, it's necessary for our survival." The board voted unanimously to accept the investors' conditions. 3 weeks after the incident at O'Hare, Atlantic Airways announced a series of concrete changes. 2 new diverse board members with civil rights backgrounds, mandatory accountability metrics tied to executive compensation, and a complete overhaul of customer service training. The lounge manager and receptionist who had confronted Marcus weren't simply fired as scapegoats. Instead, they became part of the first group to go through the new training program, with their future employment contingent on demonstrated change. Marcus never publicly connected himself to these changes. When business reporters called seeking comment, he simply said, "Every company should be consistently examining how they can better serve all their customers." I'm pleased to see Atlantic Airways taking steps in that direction. The merger timeline was officially back on track, though with new terms and conditions that would reshape Atlantic Airways from the inside out. 6 months after the incident at O'Hare, Marcus Reynolds stood at the window of his New York office, watching the autumn leaves fall in the park below. On his desk sat the latest issue of Business Week with the headline, "Atlantic Airways, a case study in corporate transformation." The changes at Atlantic had gone far beyond what anyone expected. Catherine Parker, after initial resistance, had embraced the opportunity to remake the company, or perhaps, more accurately, she had recognized which way the wind was blowing and positioned herself at the front of the change. The Atlantic-Suncoast merger had finally been completed 2 months ago, creating the nation's third-largest airline. But the new company looked quite different from what was originally planned. 3 of Atlantic's board members have been replaced with diverse leaders from various industries. Their new Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Amara Wilson, a respected organizational psychologist, reported directly to the CEO and had veto power over major policy decisions. Most surprisingly, Catherine Parker had stepped aside as CEO, taking the role of executive chairwoman instead. Her replacement, James Littlefield, was a respected industry veteran known for creating inclusive corporate cultures. "You never went public with your story," Diane said, entering Marcus's office with coffee. "Most people still don't know you were the catalyst for all this." Marcus turned from the window. "That was never the point. The change matters, not who gets credit." His phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Atlantic's quarterly diversity report just released. Complaint numbers down 78%, employee satisfaction up 23%, stock price highest in company history. Marcus smiled slightly. The financial world had taken notice. 2 other major airlines had recently announced similar initiatives, recognizing that corporate culture wasn't just about values, it was about value. Later that afternoon, Marcus headed to a meeting at the newly established Horizon Foundation. Using a portion of his firm's profits, he had created an organization dedicated to increasing opportunities for underrepresented groups in finance and transportation. The foundation offered scholarships, mentorship programs, and funding for entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. As Marcus entered the conference room, he was surprised to see a familiar face, Barbara Chen, the tech columnist whose social media post had first brought attention to the incident. "Mr. Reynolds," she greeted him, "I've been hoping to meet you properly. Your foundation's work is impressive." "Thank you for joining our advisory board," Marcus replied. "And thank you for speaking up that day at O'Hare. Not everyone would have." Barbara shook her head. "I only pointed out what was happening. You're the one who created lasting change instead of just accepting compensation and moving on." The meeting began, focused on expanding the foundation's mentorship program to include high school students interested in aviation careers. Among the attendees was Harold, the elderly gentleman from Marcus's flight to San Francisco, whose daughter's renewable energy company was now partnering with the foundation. After the meeting, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Jeffrey Winters, formerly Atlantic Airways VP of Corporate Affairs, had recently joined the foundation's staff. "The first group of our scholarship recipients toured Atlantic's Operations Center today," Jeffrey reported. "The staff couldn't have been more welcoming. It's a different company now." Marcus nodded. "And the lounge staff from O'Hare. The receptionist is now helping develop our customer service training materials. Her perspective has been invaluable." The manager, Jeffrey paused. He struggled with the changes at first, but eventually became one of our most committed advocates. He's leading the regional initiative on inclusive customer experience. As evening fell over New York, Marcus packed up his briefcase. On his desk calendar, he noted his upcoming flight to London on Atlantic Airways. He had flown with them several times since the incident, each time noting small but meaningful improvements in service and culture. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had transformed not just one company, but was beginning to shift an entire industry. Marcus hadn't sought revenge or personal gain. Instead, he had used his position and knowledge to create systemic change that would benefit countless people he would never meet. As he left his office, Marcus thought about how power, properly applied, didn't need to destroy. It could transform.